My 6 to 11-year-old self would be shocked to hear that I don't really keep up with Western animation anymore. I still follow a lot of artists in the industry, I just haven't optimistically followed any new productions in ages. You can only handle so many rallying cries like, guys, we have to go see the Bob's Burgers movie to prove that 2D animation is still profitable, before it just gets too bleak to hang. Why did they stop making cartoons for kids that appeal to me, an adult? Is a question that prompts an obvious answer, but naive as it may be, I'd like to posit that we didn't just get old. Public opinion seems to be that the odd future era of Cartoon Network still holds up. If I was the age I am now in 2012, I probably would watch Adventure Time every week. I still think it's funny when they swear on regular show. I'll confess that I only forced myself to like the first half of Gundam G-Cucks because it reminded me of being 12 watching Steven Universe hype moments and aura. Enough of my friends in their 20s with jobs have enjoyed watching these shows for the first time that they clearly hold some non-nostalgic appeal. And these corporations are aware of that demand because we're getting revivals of all these shows. But the desire for Adventure Time 2 isn't necessarily literal. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad we have this, but like, what new thing are you making now that you're gonna make spin-offs of in like a decade? Don't you want new IP too? This would be easy to hand-wave as just part of this larger cultural moment where companies are just less adventurous and more inclined to go all in on existing IP, but there's one thread of the complicated answer we can latch onto. The last few decades of TV animation for kids have been dominated by a select few brands. This whole time Nickelodeon has had SpongeBob and has been famously risk-averse about anything that's not SpongeBob. Disney is similarly pretty conservative because they're Disney, but in the late 2000s, Cartoon Network was having a disastrous identity crisis. The only way to get out of this hole was to gamble on fresh talent, leading to an influx of eccentric, creator-driven cartoons that audiences loved. Only once that demand had been proven did other studios follow suit. It was a golden age for the type of offbeat, indulgent project that actually connects with people and gets popular. And like all golden ages, it was never going to end.
Looks like the bubble burst. Bubbles can burst?
The 2023 closure of Cartoon Network's office in Burbank essentially marked the end of the studio as a being with autonomy. If you're out of the loop on how this happened, the broad strokes are that the studio's parent company underwent a series of corporate mergers, taking on lots of debt in the process. So some guy named like Richard Zoloft or something has restructured everything into a constellation of get-rich-quick schemes. My understanding is that under this new business model, Cartoon Network, the studio, doesn't have the power to greenlight shows for Cartoon Network, the TV channel, anymore. They have to sell them outside the company. This is why the new season of Gumball is on Hulu, or the new Steven Universe project is going to Amazon Prime. And it's no coincidence that these are revivals of existing IP. These buyers aren't willing to take the same risks on new original projects that Cartoon Network would have. And no other big corporation is rising to take up that mantle for the same reasons they didn't 20 years ago. So TV animation as a medium is stuck in this monetary and cultural gridlock. The lack of new productions has led to a devastating lack of jobs. And now, there are multiple generations of creatives with no path to getting their voice heard in the industry. But I think we should stop to consider the real victims in all this. The audience. Good post-Adventure Time, pre-bubble bursting cartoons have suddenly become a very finite resource. It sure is a shame they only ever made the 5 or 6 shows that everyone always talks about, and they made nothing else for us to rewatch and reevaluate. There's more? What do you mean they made more? This is a video about OKKO, and why I like it and think it's good. Saying that with as little I know it's a kids show hear me out hand-wringing as possible has been a challenging exercise in vulnerability. Cringe may be dead, but the desire to be properly surveilled is not. And in this instance, my instinct to filibuster feels justified. Both OKKO and my fondness for it connect to a specific moment in both animation production and animation fandom. One I think we finally have enough distance to attempt a post-mortem on. It'll still be filtered through my shallow understanding, but I was was lucky enough to have some help. After I had written most of this video, I had the opportunity to speak with industry professional and OKKO's co-executive producer Toby Jones. He provided some much-needed fact-checking, but encouraged me to stick to my original vision without knowing what I'm saying right now. So, to be clear, his willingness to help out is not a blanket cosign, nor did it compromise any of my own hot takes.
It's a shame how much quality scripted and board-driven content is ignored.
While I doubt this video is anyone's first introduction to the distinction between script-driven and board-driven animated shows, to review, script-driven shows are exactly what they sound like. A script is written, then animated. These are typically traditional sitcoms or serialized story-driven shows with lots of moving parts. In board-driven shows, a small writer's room makes brief outlines for each episode, but the moment-to-moment action and dialogue is written by the artist drawing the storyboards, leaning into the strength of animation as a visual medium. One positive trade-off of the writer and artist taking on two huge jobs at once is a stronger sense of authorship and ownership over the completed episode, which we can see manifest in the trend of artists making unofficial promo images for their episodes. Almost kind of like gig posters. It seems like this took off with Rebecca Sugar's old art for her Adventure Time episodes. Look at this one for the first Fiona and Cake episode where the board artists are also gender swapped. That's so cute. Oh, my heart.
Those gig posters were huge for me as far as understanding the artistry and authorship behind the episodes. And I started to understand that the same person who's responsible for the funny drawings is also responsible for the funny dialogue. I still at that time probably thought Adventure Time was script driven until I saw those posts.
This increase in education about how these shows are made was incredibly useful for anyone hoping to one day work in animation themselves. But since it was conveyed through the social media presence of individual artists, something strange happened. As soon as this job was understood, it immediately began to carry with it a degree of niche celebrity. The potential good and bad of this became very apparent in the discussion around Rebecca Sugar's own show, Steven Universe. Every artist on the show had a very distinct style, and usually got assigned episodes to fill a certain niche. One team got a lot of the big flashy fight scenes, but also some of the best sad stuck Pearl stuff. One team was especially good at writing Peridot. One team's episodes usually had cartoonier action, and so on. It was also fun to spot when Rebecca Sugar would jump in to draw a single pose. If you were deep in the weeds on this kind of thing, it added this weird extra layer of meta engagement where you could be a fan of not just the show, but the show's production.
There is a aspect of parasocial fandom that happens where it's like, oh, not only am I a fan of this show, but I am a fan of imagining what it would be like to make the show. And I'm a fan of looking at photos on the Adventure Time crew blog of what Cartoon Network Studios looks like and fantasizing about what it would be to be there. And it's funny for me to say as someone who's now worked there for 15 years, but that was me. And it's like, if that was me, that was probably a lot of other people too.
What makes Steven Universe stand out as an inflection point is that this mode of engagement wasn't limited to the fandom's most dedicated animation nerds. It trickled down to what felt like everyone watching the show as just another vector of analysis. Tumblr live bloggers started treating board teams like sports teams and judging their performance. This speaks to a growing appreciation of the craft and the labor these individuals put into shows, but it also provides an avenue for resentment. If you can pick out someone's artistic sensibility and you don't like it, that can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. You might start to see someone's name in the credits and roll your eyes before you've even seen what they have to offer this week. I think we can pinpoint late 2016 or so as when The Simpsons got bad after Conan left-ification of understanding what a storyboard artist does had fully set in. Just enough inside baseball was commonly understood that the remaining misconceptions became more specific and therefore had more capacity to be destructive. I think this laid some groundwork for the avalanche of bad faith discussion that followed, which is pretty well documented elsewhere, but something just as interesting was happening at the other end of this double-edged sword. Those who had already mastered identifying art styles were moving on to a different aspect of how these shows get made: opaque corporate decision-making. The shows that started the 2010s animation boom were ending, and fans were anticipating a second gold rush, often in hopes that they themselves would be in the industry during the third. But who should they put their stock behind? Who's going to be the next Rebecca Sugar? It made the most sense to think about where those creators came from to see if history would repeat itself. Enter this chart. Thurup Van Orman's Flapjack employed J.G. Quintel, Pendleton Ward, Alex Hirsch, and Patrick McHale, all of whom would find near immediate success in the industry with their own shows. Today, this is just like that Tumblr post about 1913 Vienna and 2013 Boston. But at the time, this gave people faith in this, like, animation meritocracy, where you paid your dues, then got your own show, which was a super appealing narrative if your dream was to have your own show one day. It's tempting to approach this idea with the cynicism of the modern day, like, wasn't it cute how naive we were? But if we limit our scope to just Cartoon Network, it mostly tracks.
The thing that made Cartoon Network unique at the time, and no longer exists right now pretty much anywhere, is that the people who you are sharing the building with, and you end up in the elevator with and chatting with casually, are the same people greenlighting your show, basically. Because they know you, they maybe know they can trust you, and they maybe know that they can take a chance on you. Someone like JG is a perfect example. Even though regular show is like a non-pitch, on paper, why would someone ever make a show like that, you know? But the reason why is because they knew his sensibility of his humor, and they knew that they could trust him, and then they knew he knew how to make a show.
Following this logic, there was someone at the studio who anyone paying attention knew should be getting their flowers soon.
Hey, Ian. Hey, dude. I'm doing a documentary behind the scenes. Right. Okay, see you later.
Ian Jones-Quartey's impressive resume included early gamer webcomic RPG World, Flash Cartoon and roommate rap duo Knock Force, animation direction on The Venture Bros, storyboards for the short-lived Secret Mountain Fort Awesome, a storyboard supervisor position on Adventure Time, and most recently being a big wheel at the Steven Universe factory. Cartoon Network shows didn't really have developed by credits at the time, but there's a timeline not far from this one where he's credited as a co-creator of that show. He left the show after season 2, which fans suspected had something to do with his 2012 pilot Lakewood Plaza Turbo, which over the course of a mobile game, 2 unproduced episodes, and a handful of weird online shorts, was gradually retooled into OKKO, which was indeed the next big thing, at least to freaks like me. The show getting so much time to cook is ultimately the best thing that could have happened to it, which we'll get into later. Filling the same position Ian did on Steven Universe is Toby Jones, a prolific writer and board artist on Regular Show, who had his own pilot called AJ's Infinite Summer. A fun remnant of AJ and OKKO is their shared use of this insane pronunciation.
I sure am sorry.
I'm sorry about everything.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, man.
A benefit of this running gag is that it builds a joke into every heartfelt apology scene, which is great TV design. While the DNA of all those shows I just mentioned is visible, an important distinction is that OKKO feels designed from the ground up to be, first and foremost, a funny drawing delivery machine. I remember when it first came out, this drew unfavorable comparisons to like the newest seasons of SpongeBob, or just any of those wacky cartoons where every take is a wild take for the sake of being a wild take. But OKKO's take on this sensibility is delightfully devoid of guy who's a little too reverent about Spumco particles. Its funny drawings feel much more akin to something your friend would post or show you in the back of class, which allows them to be equally constant and digestible. It feels humble, you know? My understanding of the philosophy behind OKKO's production is maybe most informed by this stupid cowboy hat. Like most American cartoons, OKKO utilized animation studios in South Korea. The job of these studios is to animate shows as consistently and closely on model as possible, so preserving the eccentricities of a silly storyboard drawing actually requires special instruction and oftentimes much more effort than it just looking normal.
There are several sequences in the episode where we go to Cowboy Daryl at his desk and he's talking. The original animation we got on them, he looked a little bit more normal and his hat was more like normal size. And it didn't look quite like the board, it looked a little bit more like the model, and he just didn't look nearly as stupid.
So we actually sent those scenes back.
At great expense.
Yes.
To make sure that Daryl's hat was big and stupid looking enough, and it was incredibly expensive.
We'll spend the most money making something really dumb and funny looking. I felt that that was our duty.
This goal made the show very design intensive. It's amazing how many super specific, context-sensitive model sheets were made for individual shots. In nearly every interview, Ian stresses the importance of reminding the viewer that these drawings were drawn by people and didn't just come out of the cartoon tubes. This mission statement gets reflected in the credits theme. The lyrics are just about how cool animation is.
It's only magic. Isn't it amazing when you know? Every second that you see is 24 connected pieces.
This also informs the show's line work, which to my understanding was literally done in pencil. It's not always too noticeable, but you'll occasionally get a shot with some nice texture from this. This was also inspired by the hand-drawn look of Yoshi's Island. OKKO had designated storyboard revisionists, but the relatively low demand for meticulous revisions would sometimes let them instead focus their attention on punching up action scenes. This ebb and flow trade-off of saving resources for when it matters most allows for some neat flourishes you don't typically see in this kind of cartoon. Some Western Sakuga, if you will.
So, you want a realistic, down-to-earth show that's completely off the wall and swarming with magic robots.
KO is a 6 to 11-year-old boy, obsessed with the notion of becoming a hero. He's in luck because he secured a job at Gar's Bodega, which sells supplies to heroes. Heroes being a catch-all term for the varied OCs who inhabit Lakewood Plaza. KO knows who all of these background characters that could be protagonists are because he collects trading cards of real people that display their current power levels. I tend to struggle with young boy protagonists in basically anything, but KO is one of the good ones. He's adorably well-observed Gen Z representation. If you're my age, I'm guessing you also knew the kid in 5th grade who watched way too much Dragon Ball, and KO is very explicitly them. He works alongside Rad, an alien stock boy from Planet X, who's come to Earth to show you his muscles and his van. The one person who's known Rad long enough to instantly see through his facade is Enid, who's part witch, part ninja, part jaded retail worker.
Rad and Enid are kind of just shitty teens. They're not really great people. They're kind of just jerks to themselves and each other. They would probably be pretty miserable if they didn't have a kid around who thought that they were the greatest, most important people of all time. KO being there sort of lets these characters be a little more vulnerable.
They're a perfect triangle of characters. This dynamic kind of always works on me. It gets nicely explored in the early episode, Do You Have Any More in the Back?, where Rad tries to use KO's unconditional faith in him as a bargaining chip against Enid. The cheerful rookie who wants to help people but has to learn about the world is a very common archetype, but there's a nice specificity to KO's goal-oriented tunnel vision. One of the earliest episodes is partially about KO having an identity crisis after Rad tells him he's a one-dimensional character.
He's simple, and you're simple. Simple, simple, simple.
Some inspiration for KO's character came from an unlikely place: the TV drama adaptation of Kazuhiko Shimamoto's Blue Blazes.
It's got this character who fails constantly and kind of sucks at what he's doing, but he sees what he's doing as the most legendary heroic journey of all time.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of our in for KO, is that KO's a little kid and he kind of sucks at what he's doing, but he sees himself as potentially being this amazing, great hero. And that was step one.
The more obvious Gainax connection staring us down is that OKKO's opening sequence was storyboarded by Hiroyuki Imaishi, who you may know as the Studio Trigger guy. Before all that happened, he was the Fooly Cooly Episode 5 guy. But his first storyboarding gig was on fundamental OKKO influence Kare Kano, also known as His and Her Circumstances, also known as the show I like to use as B-roll that I keep getting comments about. I don't have the required knowledge to make a whole video about Kare Kano, so I'm seizing this opportunity for a tangent. It's difficult to succinctly illustrate how exactly my shit Kare Kano is without being reductive. The apocryphal playground assumption that Gainax made Fooly Cooly as a fun passion project to recover from the stress of finishing Ava immediately stops making any sense when you know that 26 episodes of Kare Kano came between them. It would only be a single layer of complete poser idiot speculation down for me to assert that Kare Kano was in fact the actual wind down, especially when its own troubled production is evident on screen. But I think Ian JQ's perspective as a viewer holds true.
Kare Kano is like therapy. You feel the restorative power of art.
A lot of what we did on OKKO visually is spiritually connected to what this show was doing. You can see the hand of who's drawing every scene. The characters morph and shift physically based on their emotional state. There are a couple of chase scenes in the show that I absolutely adore. There's one in, I think it was episode 2 or 3. Yukino's running away and she jumps out the window, which is amazing. And then there's the one that happens later that gets crazier and crazier as it goes, and Yukino's actually like a ghoulish monster. Your brain is like, this is not physically possible to happen in a grounded universe, but somehow emotionally it feels true. The thing about that show is that it is on a week-to-week TV pipeline and budget, and it uses a lot of limited animation techniques to get big emotions and big moments through. And that is kind of the thing about what Ian calls Hanna-Barbera. We can't do big, let's say, Fooly Cooly style, OVA style, huge, gorgeous sequences all the time. But what we can do is get as many funny drawings and big emotions into the show as we possibly can. We even tried to pull certain sound effects. In Kerry Kano, there's that thing where it's like when a character notices something, and there is a recurring sound in KO where we tried our best to replicate that exact sound.
Anyway,
we're both the good one.
Hey.
Of course, I'm foregrounding Kerry Kano because that's what I know. I'm excited to see someone with the prerequisite gutsy frog knowledge make their own OKKO video. There's also obviously a lot of Sonic in this thing, literally in one episode. I love Tails getting pushed off screen so he dies and respawns. That's a videos game joke. Ian also animated a couple shots in the Sonic Mania opening FMV, which is cool. One episode also gave Ian the opportunity to revisit his abandoned 2000s webcomic, RPG World, and give it a finale, which is yet another based use of Cartoon Network money if you ask me. I reread some of RPG World for this video. It's pretty of its time. I honestly got more invested in the accompanying blog captions than the comic itself. If you're watching this and you've been online for like 25 years, please make a Keen Spot video so my eternal September ass doesn't have to. If we're tossing out gamer breadcrumbs, I've described OKKO to people as the first cartoon that feels meaningfully post-Undertale. Mostly jokingly, but it did start production in fall 2015, so in one sense it's true. The show didn't start airing until nearly 2 years later, which is an unusually large gap between greenlight and premiere. The network wanted a large backlog of episodes, so the entire first half of the show's run was written before anything was shown to the public. You can really feel the energy of this crew working in a vacuum and falling in love with inside jokes.
It was able to feel like its own thing, kind of untarnished from external eyes for a really, really long time. We were just going to work every day, making each other laugh and kind of one-upping each other.
Working this far in advance gave them time to be unusually deliberate about the structure and pacing of Season 1. It's subtle, but you can tell they put a lot of care into making the first 20 or so episodes feel very balanced to ease you in. Each Enid Spotlight episode gets matched with an equivalent rad one. They feel spaced out super nicely.
We referred to it as like a mixtape. These songs need to sound good next to each other.
I don't feel like this happens too often in episodic cartoons. They were also incredibly intentional about which episodes were assigned to which storyboard team, something I assumed, but didn't expect Toby to confirm so emphatically. The ability to produce episodes out of order so this could line up was another affordance of having a head start. Season 1 got some other nice quality of life changes. The first 3 episodes were actually produced a little later into the season because they wanted to practice on more standalone episodes before tackling these first impressions. The first episode produced is buried about a dozen episodes in because they knew it would be especially rough around the edges. The episode Legends of Mr. Gar was conceived pretty deep into the season, but it was bumped up much earlier to better establish Gar's reputation as a badass, before some of his first big plot moments could undercut his stoic facade. And the cool thing is, you can easily intuit this trivia just by watching the show. In one of the most wiki editor-friendly decisions I've ever seen, the internal production code for each episode is made plainly visible under its title card. Luckily, nothing produced during the show's 2 years growing in stasis felt too dated on arrival. The episode about Vine became an unintentional post-mortem after the platform shut down, but that one happens to be an absolute banger. Everybody Likes Rad is an excellent modern take on a Say the Line Bart story, covering how that gets increasingly complicated when so much Gen Z online slang is just appropriated AAVE.
No cap, I was dead-ass pressed about understanding this language.
A lot of famous Vines were sort of people co-opting cultural things. All of our slang now is just black drag culture slang, throwing shade, yas. It's just like complete co-opting of someone's culture. What would that look like in a world as insane as ours?
So is that like a Planet X thing?
The allegorization of these ideas for kids allows the commentary to efficiently cover more ground rather than impeding it. It's a very economic plot. Even on the surface level, seeing the bad impact font meme struggle depicted in a cartoon in 2017 felt as impactful as when they swore on regular show. Like, oh my god, they get it. I feel similarly spoken to by the episode KO's video channel, which might be my absolute favorite one from the This Is So Cute It Makes Me Sob angle.
That was one of the first episode concepts that Ian ever told me about. The version of YouTube that we were commenting on also is relating to childhood art making. It has as much in common with what was going on YouTube as it did with things we shot on VHS in our own houses as kids.
I've been on both sides of the conflict in this episode and find its depiction of them devastatingly relatable. See also the My First Animation joke in the film festival episode. In general, this is a show with the heart of a seasoned poster. There's an earnest clarity to the way it approaches post-internet life that still feels kind of novel. And this isn't limited to when it literally comments on social media, or the moments where its Newgrounds YTP sensibility shines brightest. For example, the reality TV episode was also inspired by Toby Jones finding a small YouTube channel, then having some guilt over influencing the direction of their content with his comments. This specific perspective helps ground an otherwise very silly episode. It becomes about the importance of remembering to look, not touch. And any seasoned netizen knows a show like this needs a funny villain.
I hate you kids! I hate this bodega! I hate Lakewood Plaza Turbo!
Our resident Dr. Robotnik is Lord Boxman. He runs the evil robot supply factory across the street. It's kind of a Krusty Krab chum bucket situation. Apparently, Boxman was initially conceived as more of an imposing M. Bison type character. His mutated arm would be hidden under a cloak. It's hard to imagine given what he became, but he still looks extra fucked up in his first couple appearances, which I appreciate. In more episodes than not, Boxman sends his family of robotic henchmen to attack the plaza. They come down in blind boxes like collectible toys. It's cute. Boxman's excuse is that friendship is affecting his profit margins, but his board of investors feel differently and wonder why he's spending so much time attacking something that's barely even on their radar.
Who cares about the profits? That accursed plaza doesn't even have a scratch on it!
This culminates in the season 1 finale with his most dangerous creation yet, Boxman Jr. As an aside, Boxman Jr. was inspired by the team's collective dislike of Bowser Jr. They wanted a villain they wouldn't feel bad about killing off in their first appearance, so the baby it is. This egregious misuse of resources gives Boxman's robot son that he hates an opportunity to rat his dad out to the board, oust him and take over the company. If he's the CEO, no one can stop him from wearing his big cowboy hat.
This isn't your office anymore. I didn't! What? This isn't your factory. I'm the daddy now!
The show's gone downhill since Boxman left.
Eventually, Boxman reconnects with purple and mysterious fan-favorite character Professor Venomous. PV is a respected modern establishment villain, but he's bored. All he does now is answer emails and make calls. Inspired by Boxman's passion for petty villainy, he uses his capital to buy back Boxmore so they can run it together as two dads. There's a contrast drawn where Boxman represents a dying breed of lighthearted episodic Saturday morning cartoon villain that just isn't as marketable anymore, whereas Professor Venomous, as a Tumblr sexy man, represents a more efficient industrialized villainy that leaves more time for his involvement in the show's deep lore. This juxtaposition makes them such a good ship dynamic that it had to be canon. The concept of Venomous getting in on the silly Team Rocket stuff and getting his hands dirty is pretty interesting on paper. Sadly, this plot thread is kind of a casualty of the weirdness of Season 2. Season 1 was made in isolation, without answering to many expectations, while Season 3 was made with the knowledge that it would be their last, so they got the creative freedom necessary to get where they needed to go. But Season 2 is kind of an outlier. It's the only stretch of OKKO where you can feel the team and the network disagreeing on what the show should be. The team made efforts to balance plot progression with on-ramps for new viewers. but these attempts were seemingly met with indifference from the network.
With Point Prep, we were like, oh, somebody who passed on OKKO at the beginning, maybe Point Prep will draw them in. But the network was like, we will not allow that to happen.
Another example was the CN Cinematic Universe team-up episode Crossover Nexus. This concept predicted the Fortnitification of the channel's IP. Like, they were early to the corporate synergy, so theoretically this should be a slam dunk. This was originally conceived as a 22-minute special, but for whatever reason, the network requested that the already completed storyboard be exploded and rebuilt into a normal 11-minute episode. So any new viewers tuning in for this one saw OKKO at its most hyperactive and rushed, which I think ultimately kind of damaged the show's reputation. Whenever the staff talks about this part of the show, there's some indication that these experiments got them in trouble, which is evident in the shape the season ended up taking. A lot of the plot development in the back half of season 2 had to be condensed into a few episodes, with a sudden influx of very silly, frivolous ones in the empty space. They're a little exhausting without the balanced pacing of season 1. This also has the unintended effect of making the Boxmore regime changes feel like more of a focused story arc than it's actually supposed to be. We're just sampling a few possible status quos the show could have done entire seasons in, and only get a couple of episodes emblematic of what each one would have been.
Would have been good to get one more episode of just seeing Cowboy Daryl doing Cowboy Daryl's thing. We get a few. Definitely Let's Watch the Boxmore show really encompasses that. We wouldn't have been able maybe to do a bunch of very detailed storyline based episodes about what's going on at Boxmore without KO being involved at that point in the show's lifespan. In an episode like Boxman Crashes and All in the Villainy, they were getting flagged a little bit as being like, hey, we don't like that you're spending so much time away from KO.
They did their best to make sure the old man Yowie burned bright, if brief. Stephen Ogg does a fantastic job voicing PV. I can only assume he was hired based on the strength of his performance in this video.
Go fuck yourself!
One silly detail I like is that while Venomous is kind of implicitly a tech guy, his understanding of doomsday devices and finance doesn't mean he actually knows how to use his computer.
You'll have to forgive me. I shifted my attention not long ago to installing antivirus software.
These skills instead get offloaded to his adoptive daughter and bodyguard Fink. Their dynamic is best illustrated by this production sketch. Ian and Toby credit Ryan Shannon with designing and developing these two in their first appearance. She's the one who pitched that Venomous should be hot. It's another good example of what the best case scenario of a board-driven show can afford, where there's space for a passionate individual to step up and make sure that one character has the sauce. Funnily enough, Toby singled out a different instance of this in the same episode.
Daddy, may I wear my costume? What? No!
That was something that was just observed from Parker's life of some kids that he knew. He pitched that to us in conversation, and I was like, what? But go ahead and try it. And then, of course, it ended up very much informing just how ridiculous those characters would get in their relationship with Boxman.
This same board team is also responsible for the Cactus Crew episode, where KO reconnects his mom with a villain from her past. After receiving this plot outline, they decided that if said villain is from before KO was born, he would logically be an early 2000s nu metal guy, voiced by none other than Jonathan Davis of Korn.
My life could end at any second!
Yeah, a coffee would really wake me up inside about now.
For good measure, he also has an annoying grandson, and all of his friends are dying.
Busy again.
This feels like a good time to lightning round through some of the other deranged things I love in this show. There's a joke in the episode Plaza Alone, where KO is crashing out and his head gets superimposed onto this old promotional poster from when the show was first announced. I always love a good model sheet Squidward gag that's funny to 10 people. The episode where a gang of Gex-esque 90s platformer mascots invade the store is another one of my favorites.
Food.
A funny note here is that the show's staff had a list of banned words and phrases to avoid using. For example, aside from a few rare instances, characters almost never say awesome, because in a show this awesome, everyone would always be saying awesome all the time. But to make these specific characters as annoying as possible, they were allowed to use every phrase on the list.
And the funny thing is, I regret it, because the characters are constantly saying hashtag in that episode, and now it feels like ancient history. And I get that that was the point at the moment, but it's like we should have just invented something for that episode.
This one has one of the best endings in the show. I won't give away where it goes, but it's so funny to me. It pairs well with the following episode, You Are Rad, which is a super cute character study. I would be a bad ally if I didn't mention the infamous furry episode, where the gang becomes animals, realizes that being animals isn't very fun, and while seeking out a way to change back, end up at a reverse furry convention, where all of the show's cartoon animal people dress as cartoon human people.
The original structure for the episode was much more conventional, where the whole episode was building up to this climax where they become animals and fight the bad guy. Instead, what we did was we nudged the climax of the episode up to the end of Act 1. We had to come up with a new triple escalation of the idea for Act 3, which is completely insane, but also very sweet.
Toby noted that this just happened to end up being one of the best animated episodes, and I have to agree. There's some lovely dynamic action. Even scenes of the characters just standing around talking look nice too. This episode is also one of the only appearances of beloved pet dino Baby Teeth. He's like the pets on The Simpsons, who blink in and out of existence as needed. Speaking of which, did you know that Boxman has a dog? According to the fan wiki, her name is Doublebeat. I think this might be the least popular named OKKO character.
Don't you remember how Dogman changed after his time skip?
Oh, Dogman was in a war!
I love this S&P mandated hood of car seatbelt for safety. I love when Rad turns into beer. I love the explicit Gorilla Munch reference. Crazy pull. If you are also a Gorilla Munch kid, drop a comment below. Oh my god, I hadn't seen the box redesign until now. That's bad. I don't like that. I should also shout out Season 3's Red Action episode. A pet peeve of mine is when the last normal episode of a show before moving into endgame finale territory offers no subtler resolution and is kind of just another episode. This one makes its position count. It has a great plot fake out I won't spoil. They time travel back to Season 1 and nail the art style perfectly to show how the show evolved. It's just a nice note to leave Rad and Enid on ahead of the KO-centric final arc. I'm not gonna talk about Gar and Carol too much, because I have to limit the scope of this video where I can, but they exude some of the same heterosexual joy that Sans and Toriel do. I can't have two Undertale jokes, I gotta cut this, hold on.
Never forget that the chance to redeem yourself will always come. I'll, just, put this, here?
Gar would probably be my favorite character outside the main trio if it wasn't for Dendi.
You neglected taking me with you.
Sorry, Dendi. We just weren't thinking.
No, you weren't. But I am. Always.
Peak character design. I don't know anyone who's seen the show that doesn't love her. Whenever she shows up, there's a sound effect of kids cheering.
Dendi! What were you doing in my van?
I also love her dynamic with Rad. This is another element of the show that emerged very naturally, starting as a couple of jokes Geneva Hodgson put in, then paying off in the episode Hope This Flies. I love this episode, but it leaves room for a deeper exploration of this duo later on. Apparently there was always a note on the wall of the writer's room that said Rad and Dendi, but they never cracked the specifics. Speaking of notes on the wall, I had to ask about this one that says Lakwad Ploza Terbo.
That one actually sources from a really old episode idea called Legal Plaza Turbo, where a competitor to Lakewood Plaza Turbo opens up across the street that's like a bootleg version that's like just barely legally distinct. So Gar has like a badass like fighting legal battle with those people.
This idea was partially cannibalized into the episode Soda Genie, which centers Enid instead of Gar due to her background with magic. I asked if Toby wanted to shout out any especially underappreciated episodes in this section, and this was one of them, along with Seasons Change, Beach Episode, Planet X, Deep Space Vacation, and KO's Health Week.
Those are ones that come to mind that don't often get quite as much attention. All the ones that people always talk about, I do love those too.
I forgot to write a transition here. Let's talk about sound design. The sound design of OKKO honestly warrants its own video. The one thing that immediately comes to mind is how the sound when Rad uses his powers incorporates this like Hanna-Barbera magic noise. Something easier to talk about is that the show has a great score. There are some good-ass music cues in here. The soundtrack was handled by Mint Potion, a studio headed by Jake Kaufman, who composed for Shovel Knight and about 1,000 other things. There's lots of nice live instrumentation, but you'll also hear intentionally bad, like default Windows MIDI drums when something dumb is happening. Some especially inspired choices include the automaton in Michaela's theme, the Dendy Ernesto fight getting some prime 2015 electro swing, and TKO getting a fittingly stupid sound palette. I also love Rad's theme. There's a video covering some of its uses in the score that I'll link in the sources. The way it gets quoted when he joins the first TKO fight gives him like an actual badass hero moment before all of his bones get broken. And I love the dramatic sad arrangement of it they use in a few episodes. I'm just gonna let it play for a moment. It reminds me of that one song from Ava that I can't play, which they also do a very specific parody of in the second episode of Season 3. Beautiful. Joke just for me. I was so surprised the first time I learned that the fake in-universe emo songs in a couple of episodes were performed by William from the band Kara's Walk Home, who worked as a background painter on the show. William also co-wrote the song sung by Donkey Kong Country himself.
I am a good guy, you're a bad one. I know that's your role.
The original demo is pretty surreal to hear. It's a little 45 minutes from Somewhere Out There adjacent. This is just one of many connections to be made when looking into the show's staff. Parker Simmons got his own show, Mau Mau, which ran for one season before not existing anymore. Whoa, Jackson Public was on this show. Geneva Hodgson's pilot, Trick Moon, seems like it would have taken the Sonic Adventure-isms of OKKO to their fullest extent, if it wasn't also sadly a merger victim. Ryan Shannon is directing on the Adventure Time spin-off where Finn says damn. Both of these people worked on 2022's Neon White, if you played that. In 2023, Iggy Craig published their debut graphic novel Sad Girl Space Lizard, described as a queer mech action romance for lizards. I haven't smoked it yet, but it might be a treat after finishing this video because this looks fucking awesome. I would hope you at least already know that Dave Allegre drew the album cover for Jeff Rosenstock's Hell Mode. He doesn't post too often, but he's been a great Instagram follow for like a decade. At the time of writing, Toby Jones is on the press tour for his debut indie film AJ Goes to the Dog Park, which I highly recommend seeking out. It's delightful from minute 1, but the unspoilable Act 3 is where it sings. I'm speaking in vague terms because you should just go watch it, but I'm so glad we have it and I got to see it in a theater full of guys who look like AJ. Finally, I'd like to take a moment to spotlight Mira Ongchua's indie comics. It feels kind of strange covering these as a footnote in a video about their old job, but it would feel equally strange to make a dedicated video with a sensational clickbait title, so hopefully this is a happy compromise to direct some real heads their way. Though it's not the most representative of their current work, they first caught my attention with 2018's Road Queen, which I think has earned its place next to Fooly Cooly in the Bike Girl media canon. It's currently out of print, but available as a free download from their website, and was recently republished on Webtoon. It nicely highlights their skill at invoking trashy fanfic premises like fake dating or everyone at my school is gay, for use as stepping stones towards much more specific and intimate stories. Everything is heightened and campy except for love, the one thing we have in this life.
Just how she likes it. What the fuck? Why am I being so fucking gay?
Then, if you're at least 18, I recommend checking out 2022's Vampire Blood Drive, which is as awesome as the title sounds. The second little vignette in the book is easily my favorite. This is what they meant by vampires will never hurt you. The Prince in the Basement, their newest book at the time of writing, is beautifully printed. It looks so good.
I came as fast as I could.
I'll link to places you can check these things out and support these people in the sources paste bin in the description. I should probably direct you somewhere you can actually watch OKKO too. Last I checked, it was right at home on HBO Max, the Everything app. Oh, it's not on there? What about Hulu? No? Can you watch OKKO legally? Remember how there was this big lead time before OKKO actually aired so they could build up more episodes? In the mid-2010s, AT&T was looking to buy Warner Brothers. AT&T planned to use its telecom infrastructure to launch a Warner Bros. Streaming service, which would later become HBO Max.
That was supposed to happen years earlier, and KO was supposed to benefit from all of that. KO was sort of supposed to be like one of the first shows that wasn't relying on TV ratings as much as it was going to rely on views on apps and stuff like that. But something happened in 2016. Donald Trump got elected as the merger was about to go through. Donald Trump specifically hated Warner Brothers because they own CNN. So he wouldn't let that merger go through. Basically what happened is all the Warner-owned studios got stuck in a holding pattern while they were waiting for this merger to go through. So there wasn't allowed to be any new spending or any new seasons or anything like that without having trade-offs for other things. It was just like a little too early. Plans didn't come together. I don't know, just kind of the whole thing got messed up.
OKKO was ultimately canceled around the time the merger finally went through. In this interview from early 2021, Ian laments that the show was just a little before its time, but in retrospect, it feels more like it got in just under the wire. Just a year later, a different merger would strike, and most of the Cartoon Network archive would be removed from HBO Max, OKKO included. It remains inaccessible to its target audience of, children, which is sad. Ultimately, none of this is surprising. Corporations aren't your friends, but OKKO being buried like this feels especially like seeing a puppy get kicked, because its love for the body of work that it's a part of kind of embodies the hope that this corporation could be. It's bittersweet seeing the reverence the show has for its studio when that iteration of it wouldn't be around much longer. While OKKO didn't come at the literal tail end of this era, it's hard not to feel like it's not just celebrating this history, but unknowingly capping it off. So, after all this praise, if you haven't seen it, do I recommend seeking out OKKO?
I give it a 7.5.
7.5?
Like all things, OKKO isn't perfect, and it won't be everyone's cup of tea. I've been cherry-picking what I consider the good stuff. The free-flowing nature of its art means it's allowed to be uncompromisingly ugly at times, and its admirable willingness to swing is going to produce some misses. I don't like the college arc. The show would be closer to what I want it to be if they were allowed to say ass instead of butt. And I have to contend with the immaturity that reveals in me, and that's uncomfortable.
The characters are so off-model in every scene. How am I supposed to weather the storm of filler episodes for these deep plot threads when they can't even keep their heights consistent? It's unabashed insanity that the showrunners thought we could stomach this.
Look, I initially had a big section here about the nature of animation as a magic trick, and how TV animation especially is built on chains of hundreds of miracles, how our perception of the Adventure Time era's sacred cows might be shaped by the 20 best episodes, and they might be less consistent than the Instagram Reels collective memory wants you to believe. But crucially, losing the rose-tinted glasses doesn't make these miracles under constraint any less deserving of your grace. I thought about pulling out that one Miyazaki quote and everything, but maybe I should just hope that I'm preaching to the choir. There's plenty to love in OKKO, and it deserves to be remembered for its highs to the same degree that its peers are. I think a lot of people realize that these shows were made on such a tight budget and such a tight time frame, and become disillusioned with how scattershot they can be as a result. Like, how can I admit that I like something inconsistent? And even when you get past this, letting something into your heart won't make it exactly what you want it to be. You'll still notice things you would have done differently if it were you holding that pencil. But the only way to productively channel these feelings is by making something. This is why so much of OKKO is built to remind you that what you're seeing is only magic. If nothing else, this reminder came at the right time for the audience the show reached.
I'm the kind of person who was like, where can I find Clone High? Where can I find Syphil and Ollie? Where can I find Andrew Richter Controls the Universe? Mission Hill, Stella. This was my life, was these single season shows that spoke to me that immediately were killed. And the funny thing about that is OKKO has the spirit of one of those, but we got to do 112 episodes.
Years of liking this show made me a fan of basically every artist who worked on it. And as they spread out, it becomes cooler and cooler that for a brief moment they were all in one place. Getting older gives you more and more of these moments. In senior year of high school, or your last week at a shitty job, or watching the sunrise after a party with your friends. Just being hit with the realization that regardless of whether or not you had a good time, these 5 or 10 or 20 people might never be in a room together again. This is it. The end of OKKO is a vulnerable rumination on this idea. In a move that cements the show as the Twin Peaks The Return of animation, the epic final battle happens in the second to last episode, leaving just enough time for not so much an epilogue, but a eulogy.
That kind of feeling that we were starting to have about, oh, I'm gonna miss all these people who I work with because any production is like lightning striking. You're only gonna get that certain group of people that one time. We realized that, oh, that's gonna be kind of similar to a feeling that an audience member has on their last episode of watching a show. Realizing like, oh, I'm never gonna get to see this particular mix of characters, episodes, and stories ever again.
In the last episode of OKKO, KO realizes that something is wrong. Time is moving too fast. The production codes under the title cards finally pay off as we start accelerating all the way up to episode 1000, speeding through weddings and birthdays and goodbyes and adventures that could have been.
When you get older, the more years you live, the less significant 1 year is. So we're constantly in this like time dilation where everything goes faster. At the end of every year when you say Happy New Year, that year felt faster than all the ones previous.
And it's painful when those years are filled with things that you really enjoy doing.
Yeah.
Ian and Toby credit Mira Ongchua with creating many of the dreamlike visual metaphors used to convey these feelings. My favorite are these posters with the titles of previous episodes, which evoke the board artist gig posters mentioned back at the start of this video. I don't know if that was intentional, but I know it breaks my heart. The whole episode is full of wonderfully indulgent fan service, culminating in a Where Are They Now montage that every artist on staff contributed something to. There's no other form it could take. If the episode wasn't confessional enough, the credits roll over the production's empty office. While this ending came with a few years left before its closure, hindsight does color it as something of a spiritual finale for that iteration of the studio as a whole. The feeling of grieving what could have been extends past OKKO and to the entire lost generation of projects that could have followed, which brings us full circle. In summer 2023, the iconic Cartoon Network Studios office that so many weird art kids dreamed about working in was closed. Its signage auctioned off letter by letter. The biggest archival effort this spawned was this digital recreation of the building's graffiti stairwell, which now serves as a collective senior yearbook for anyone who ever worked at the studio. Even in this janky browser form, it's incredible to click around and get lost in. Nearly all of these people are still in the industry trying to get cool things made, but as the dates on these drawings fall further and further into the past, it really starts to hit you that what you see here doesn't exist anymore. Not physically, not spiritually, it's just a moment that ended. I think it was one worth commemorating. I just got off a phone call about that unauthorized deployment of the Gitaru Man Legendary theme. I was apparently supposed to get the okay from like 6 people before I pulled the trigger on any cloying needle drops, and now I have to pay a really big fine and I'm fucked? Patreon.com/somefeatures? Revisiting basically all of the media discussed in this video was a wonderful experience. Even my hazy memories of ancient Tumblr discourse feel so quaint with distance. It may be a little less relaxing to watch before bed, but OKKO has earned its place next to Kerry Kano in the Soul Rebuilding Hall of Fame. It made me want to pick up a pencil and start drawing every day all over again. That's like the best thing animation can do. Regardless of if we're prepared for the eventual mid-2010s nostalgia wave, I'm holding on to some hope that the pendulum will swing back, and we'll slowly start seeing more original creator-driven projects again, with the support necessary to be great. I'll absolutely be there if it happens, but they might not be for me anymore, and that's okay. As much as I might always feel like a dumb kid, I'll never be a dumb kid again. I'm just grateful I got to be one at the time I did. Thank you for coming, thank you for staying, thank you for watching the video.
Mazinga 7 goes to war.
It's coming after you.
We'll break your ass in two. Mazinga 7, so climb aboard. It's a galactic quest, better than all the rest.
How to delete social media.